Cool. Welcome to the Mike James Rock Show.
Real pleasure.
Introduce yourself, just for those people who don't know who you are.
Well, my name's Jaz Coleman, and I sing in Killing Joke, and I play the keyboards in Killing Joke. I never wanted to be a singer, I have to say that.
Oh, really?
When I started with the band, I was just a keyboard player.
Yeah.
And that's all I ever wanted to do, is play the keyboards. But then, going back to the punk years, I remember youth saying, well, we don't want to pay for an extra member of the band to come in because it means we only get 20% each. So you all have to do vocals. That's what he said. Of course, and a career was born, you know. So
what a career as well. It's like 15th album's just come out. That's good.
Yeah,
do you ever think you'd get to 15 albums?
Or our 38th year as a band.
Blimey.
It's a long time, isn't it, when you think of it like this? You know, I mean, my partner's not even 38.
I'll bump you on that one. That's cool.
And the band has outlasted most of our marriages. So, it's Killing Joke is my university.
Okay.
Because like the guys, I left school at 14 with no O levels or A levels, nothing, and so. As soon as I got in the band, you know, when we started the band, we would always pass books around, and the principle of self-educating was there right from the beginning. I didn't even give it a second thought because I'm from a family of academia, although I'm not really an academic myself.
Okay.
I'm from this kind of background, and I was basically very lucky to meet up with three other guys that I've got so much in common with, that were my friends. That shared the same kind of views, really, the same revolutionary views on music, like no guitar solos, for example, as punk, and we were asking ourselves questions in 1978, like, what is an English rhythm? Which I don't suppose anybody's ever addressed, really.
No, I'd say maybe a marching band.
It's because the church has really destroyed our sense of rhythm
as a nation.
As a nation. Yeah. And if you think about most of the modern day nations, they have a direct link to the folk tunes of the nation. Well, we don't in this country. If you ask somebody to sing the songs of their forefathers, Wales excluded, generally speaking, they'll sing a Manchester United song or something, you know. So we don't have a connection to our ancestral spirit.
I get you,
And I guess we wanted to address this when we were teenagers, which is to say, we wanted to connect to our ancestral spirit, but there were no predecessors. In one sense, to address what a warlike English rhythm would sound like. These are all hypothetical notions, you know. And then, of course, you know, just having a simple notion like, to whom are we addressing our prayers? I mean, just looking at, you know, the society that we're brought up into, and our Judeo-Christian moralities that we have, and our notion of the human spirit, and the orthodox interpreters of the human spirit, i.e. the churches, and or monotheism with Judaism and Islam, and then looking at these gods and how they evolved, basically. This was very much part of Killing Joke.
Right, okay.
Yeah, also, I think...
I've been checking out some of your newer stuff at the moment.
I think we've always been virulently anti-Christian, the whole band.
Okay.
In our outlook, because we see it as essentially a false religion.
Yeah.
You know, and I would say that monotheism, generally, when I look at Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the one thing they all have in common is they are apocalyptic religions. Now, if you consider for one moment that the quantum physicists, they say that we are all participants in creating our own reality, which is to say, if we have millions of people visualizing an apocalypse, and this is what we're all aspiring to, it will probably happen.
Yeah.
And that's one of the basic reasons why these ugly religions have to go like this. At the same time, I'm not advocating deism. I think what we need is to have a notion of reverence and reciprocal maintenance with our planet Earth, and therefore Lovelock's Gaia or a feminine archetype would be more appropriate at this time, I think, and we probably will get there for the benefit of man's psychological health.
Yeah, there needs to be changes, doesn't there?
Well, sure it does.
Just going forwards, it's like where
the planet.
Where do you see those changes going? Though?
Well,
are we going to become a religionless society, or do we need
we're moving
to
into a post-capitalistic phase because we need a new planet and a half to rape. Okay. There's nothing less to... all the resources on the planet have all been quantified, and of course, unless we do something sharp, we're heading towards a resource war. Already, that's probably what started now. You know, when you look at when you look at the fact that we're dependent on oil as a power source, you know, which is another issue altogether, because in our career in 1995, we recorded the Pandemonium album in New Zealand, and New Zealand's famous for a number of things. People who do invent some very effective free energy devices normally get ferried off down there.
Okay.
Sent down there basically to grow old and die, you know, because there's such a thing called vested interests, of course, in our world. We can see this. Everything is oil dependent. To eat our bananas, our food, there's petrodollars everywhere. And of course, these vested interests. The same people that run the central banks have majority shares in the petroleum companies and the military-industrial complex and so forth, you see. And the thing is, this notion, because we're heading towards a framework of, some people call it a unipolar world or a unicentric world. And here's the thing, there's lots of different arguments on how that will be. You know, there's a Western notion that it'll be run by Western central bankers, this unicentric one world order. But there again, perhaps China and Russia disagree on this notion.
Yeah.
And anyway, even if we agreed on the idea of an elite at some point, and elites by definition could never be central bankers, because we don't need bankers, because capitalism's finished because there's nothing left to sell.
Yeah.
The way I see it.
That makes sense to me.
You know, at the moment, just to look at human development, it's only Iceland and Bhutan that consider human well-being to be more important than growth.
Oh, really?
Yes. Costa Rica, I believe. Of course, they joined those three. But it just tells you what an ugly phase we are in terms of human development.
Yeah.
That everybody has become so self-obsessed, and the me generation has become so ugly. The way we look at migrants, for example, in Europe, is a good example, you know, as a threat to us. Of course, we tend to omit the contentious fact that we've bombed Syria, we started war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we fomented revolution in so many Arab nations, Jasmine revolutions, and we fomented colour-coded revolutions on Russia's border. And if you combine this along with how the multinationals are raping Africa, then you can see, when you look at these migrants, that they are a result of our foreign policies, our actions and our greed. And what's so tragic about all this is we've got to this point where because I don't know why, but it seems to me as soon as somebody makes their first couple of billion, I'm thinking of people like Sir Richard Branson, and I'm thinking of people like Ted Turner, and our friend from Apple Computers, Melinda and Bill Gates. For some reason, they think that when they have this tremendous success, they have the right to say that the world is overpopulated and they can decide who's going to die, basically. And they talk, of course, about population control, and that's what's happening, basically. The Global 2000 report that was started under President Carter and finished with Clinton says that we need to cull the world's population by some 3 to 5 billion.
That's a substantial amount, isn't it?
So a policy of soft kill has been introduced. You don't think they've done nothing about it? That'd be ridiculous. And of course, if you spray the skies with aluminium, human beings, their bodies go on the immune system goes on a slow shutdown when you aluminium fluoride poisoning.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a policy of soft kill. This and of course Codex Alimentaris with the World Health Organization, which is of course taking out the nutrients.
There's a local band called Codex Alimentaris, and
well, good for them.
They're all about promoting the whole ethos of the Codex.
Well, you see, these are things that have to be addressed, and it's one of the reasons why I'm working with United Nations now, because I think that even in the small way of working with United Nations Orchestra and everything, I think that having good people in the United Nations can address these things. Of course, we need a new collectivism, because we don't need to cull the world's population. We just have to change our diet. At the moment, we're in a disastrous situation where 1/300th of the planet is used for our total food resource.
Oh wow!
1/300th, and the bioorganisms that make up all life are being systematically depleted, and it's not being helped by companies such like Monsanto, of course, are really behind this.
Right. Okay.
I would systematically strip these companies. I would stop them and probably imprison their CEOs if I had my way. I don't know what to say about what's happening in the world now. I think it's gone so far. Where to begin and where to end with this? And of course, it's all a little bit overwhelming, which is why you see this zombified look on people's faces when you walk down the high street. And a good night out is watching people sit in a room silent, looking at their bloody iPhones.
We all do
this
it.
Is what. No, we don't all.
Well,
do it.
no.
I do not
Collectively,
do it. And I like talking to people. I force my management company and other people to pick up the phone and ring me and talk to me. I do not take emails.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I don't use computers for anything.
Wow.
And otherwise there won't be any progress. I force people to do this. Because I believe in human interaction.
Yeah.
Ultimately, So, you can see I'm firmly stuck in the last century.
But that equates to the new album, though. I've been checking it out, listening to it, and like your new music video and whatnot. It's still very apocalyptic in the whole feel of it. Is this something? Obviously, you've just talked about everything from the last 10 years and whatnot. So is that what you've used as your basis for the new album?
Well, you have to take into consideration when we started our career in Killing Joke, we were in the middle of the Cold War, and what's happening now is that we're in the middle of a Cold War.
The new Cold War. Yeah.
And so there is a kind of sense of return to this horrible tension in the air.
Yes.
That is, and people are again living in the frail present tense and frightened to even peep at the future. They're worried about holding their jobs down. They're worried about paying their mortgages, their debts, and putting food on the table for their loved ones. This terrible struggle that's there, and of course, historically, we should be starting an all-out world war now to cull the population, but with modern technology, it's just not possible, is it? No one benefits.
Sorry?
We've got a Cold World War.
Well, that's right. And that's where full spectrum dominance, which is kind of pylon as a metaphor for, of using the weather as a force multiplier, the chemical and electrical control of humans, and mass media being run by 4 entities, if you like.
Yeah.
Half the world being owned by 85 people. It's incredible. How is it possible that we can let this happen? That this country can spend $3 billion on upgrading weapons of mass destruction? I find incredible, unbelievable. That we went into Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction, and we're spending $3 billion on upgrading weapons of mass destruction that we can't even launch without American permission. So in effect, we get a $3 billion bill for weapons that we can't use, that would be immoral to use on other members of the human race anyway.
Yeah.
You see, there is screaming insanity. There is the screaming insanity. And the sole reason why I need Killing Joke, why I need it.
Yeah. So
I can process this sick world that we're in, and it needn't be like this. That this is a dark phase that in my heart of hearts I believe we will pass through. You know.
You do see there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Then we can come through this as a human.
I believe that we will have to all pull together for the survival of the human race in the end, and that you and I and the ordinary people that are on the surface of this globe, we're all in the same boat. You know, 1 in 5 of us suffers from depression.
Yeah.
You know, most of our friends are skin. Most of the time, I'm skin. Even, you know, people don't want to know the truth.
No.
They don't want to know that, you know, I've got £800 in my bank account and that we struggle too. They want me to provide a more desirable reality that they can escape into. But I'm not going to do it. Because it's not like that.
No. You've got to tell the truth, haven't you?
You know?
Yeah, it's just got to get the message out.
And I think that's it, really. I mean, we've had a very, very dark year in Killing Joke. It's certainly Geordie and myself. Death, suicide and poverty. And these factors give us empathy with people, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And when I see the people of this country, especially young people, before they even started their lives, that they're being told, if you don't get top grades of university, don't do this, there's no chance for you. I wouldn't even get out of bed. You know? So I want to be part of a counterculture with a solution, of another way of living.
Yeah.
You know? And I take a lot of my inspiration from Epicurus. Epicurus, he said, of course, we know that good fine cuisine and dining is normally associated with being Epicurean, but Epicurus, basically, he was the first real communist and squatter, if you like, because he said that we only have to really do a couple of hours tending the garden in the afternoon, each one of us, and the rest of our time we should be spent contemplating on the arts and the finer things in life. And I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the Protestant work ethic. I think it's the biggest other shit I've ever heard. I'm completely against it. Mankind should spend his time doing the things that gives him deep pleasure.
Yes. I completely agree with you on that.
You know,
everyone would think the same.
You know, I can't advocate breaking the law, and I'm against sort of chemical drugs and this kind of thing. But I don't blame young people for selling weed. I did it too. We all did. And long live squats, because there'd be no Killing Joke without squats, because we couldn't afford a place to live, put our heads down.
It's the same now. There's so many derelict buildings.
Oh, that's
so
right.
Many homeless.
You've got how many people in Spain? Like 11 million empty houses.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of society are we?
It's crazy.
Yes. So there's so much negativity around, but the dream is simple. It's a village that is self-sustainable. And then every village and every city becoming self-sustainable. You want to eat potatoes in Manchester? We have to grow them in Manchester. We don't want to use petrodollars anymore. We have to use the best minds to how we can clean our rivers and purify our soil and our air. We need these revolutionaries to heal the planet, to say, yes, it's possible. And to find a fairer system, because there will always be trade.
Yeah.
But capitalism, the way it is now, is finished. It must go. It must go. We need to systematically disengage the central banks. We need to systematically find out the majority shareholders of the top 500 companies, and we need to disengage them. I believe in absolute mass nationalisation of everything. I believe that everybody's back garden, every park is a source of food. I would increase food supply. If I had my way, I'd decommission CERN and every nuclear power station on the planet.
Okay. And what, use solar-powered wind
We have even better forms of power than this. You're joking. If you have a look, there's so many different forms of alternative power that have been made at the patents. What's happened to these people? What's happened to these ideas? Again, we have the problem with vested interests, you see. The vested interests. And that's why at some point there has to be a big change. Again, we must disengage these. When you look at the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, of course you're aware of it. And you have these people that are the beneficiaries of the people who signed the act, the descendants of the Schiffs and the Morgans and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds that are printing the money and benefiting from the money. These families, although there's some wonderful individuals in these families, and even one member of my band works for perhaps one of these great big families, flies in his private jet even. These entities must be disengaged.
Awesome.
In the most effective way.
I can completely see your point of view on everything you've spoken about tonight. It's been an experience chatting to you, man. It really has.
It's to debate. I mean, yes, I am in a band, but I'm a concerned citizen.
It's been completely different to any other interview I've done. I've done like 300 interviews this year. Bands want to talk about their new album and their tour, and you haven't talked about it at all, really, and just opened my eyes to a bigger world. And
those are the things that bleed into our music.
Yeah, and it's getting that and people can hear them, watch this interview, and go, now I understand what the album's about and what Killing Joke are about. And things like that. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. It really has.
Tonight we're going to try out some. We haven't even practiced some of the things that we're going to try out tonight. So God help us, and don't laugh when it all falls to bits. But that's the wonderful thing about Killing Joke. When it locks in, it's just such a beast. And sometimes it's a painful process getting there, and we're going to try some different things out. In the set at the moment are some songs that we've never... I'm not talking about new songs, I'm talking about old songs we've never done live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting. But we'll see how far I'm a bit croaky, but I'll steam my voice in. It's just not a perfect world. You can go, there's not enough time for rehearsal. Sometimes we only have a day to rehearse because it's not the money. It's not the money to rehearse and put everyone up. It's just not a perfect world, so you have to mobilise everybody and you have to make the best you can with what you have,
That's the punk rock ethos, isn't it? You
we're
just
quite
get
good.
on with it. Make do with what you got.
It's not a perfect world,
Yeah.
you know. So we have to try to do this. But what's encouraging to me is in 2006, I thought to myself, well, life will probably become easier for me to exist if I get rid of banks for myself, and if I get rid of rent and any kind of mortgage. All these things have to go.
Right.
And that's what I did. So since 2006, I've been living out of a bag, basically.
Right, okay.
And taking the rough with the smooth. And as things stand, these are my only trousers that I have. So I don't have many possessions as a person. But what I do have is mobility.
Yes.
And to be able to just go somewhere and just leave and up sticks and wander, because I'm a restless person and I can't stay in one place. I've got a paradise in the Pacific. I've got my farm and my own beach and my own jungle even. But I can't be there. I have to be here.
Yeah.
Here where everything's shit and people's lives are shit. That means nothing to me. This means everything. To share this with these guys that I've known since I was a teenager. That in itself is such a great gift.
Yeah, it's quite special, especially like you're saying, like 38 years you've been
Yeah, and although I've been influenced by Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and great philosophers, no one's had a greater effect or influence on me than my three colleagues as people.
That's cool.
Nobody. And I find myself in one of the world's most influential bands with my best friends. Now, I'm not rich as a person, but that's something.
Yeah.
That's something.
It's a brotherhood, isn't it?
It is a brotherhood. And I guess if there's any aspiration, it's that we know the best music lies ahead of us. And as human beings, one by one as we die, we shall bury each other until there's one man left standing. This is a band. You know, not bitter and nasty at each other in our later years over some money or issue or financial issue or like this. Overcoming these things, these personal differences, are the most important things in my life. Overcoming the 20 years silence between Big Paul and myself, overcoming this and becoming the best of friends again, and transcending this. These are the best things. These are the things that give us meaning, that give life meaning for me.
Awesome, man. That's cool. Like I said, it's been a pleasure catching up with you, man. Thank you very much. That was awesome.
So kind of you.
Yeah, that was cool.